humans are interesting in a sense that they're very, very, very good at recreating what they're familiar with. So what you were saying earlier and what you were saying earlier, right? Why are they finding new people with the same issues? People like what they're familiar with because that is safety. That is preservation of the species.
You have wondered what you would be able to do if you were the ultimate version of you, right? You would then have an easy time creating what you want, and yes, effortlessly enjoying life too. Now, you may know this already, the influence you have over your reality is far beyond what you've been told. Soon, you realize that your outer world is merely a mirror of your inner world, and we're here to connect the dots for you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to God Mode.
Welcome back to God Mode, guys.
How you doing?
Doing great. How are you guys?
Very good.
I like your shirt.
Yeah, I wear the same shirt. I might buy multiple of them.
I like it. I
Wear
want
the
one now.
same shirt. In fact, I was at the store the other day and picked up a couple more Ferrari shirts. I literally have 2 or 3 of these.
I think this is a real plug to watch God Mode on video. We now have it across multiple video streaming platforms. YouTube should have it on Spotify soon. We're fun guys to watch, talk to.
You can see how many Ferrari shirts William actually owns, what color,
Start making
many
notes.
Lamborghinis potentially are going to get in there, things like that, you know.
Well, aside from the shirts, the next thing we're here to help you identify is relationships in your life. And whether or not you live in a hole or you are around all the people ever, you have relationships, you know somebody.
Did you say whether or not you live in a hole?
I mean, if you live in a hole, I mean, your relationship is with, I don't know, the hole. But odds are you the guy that helped you dig the hole. I don't know.
I like it. Okay.
But some of these relationships serves you, and some of them don't serve you. And I don't know that it's always obvious to people which of those fall into which category. And so I think that's what we want to talk about today is how do we know the relationships we should keep, grow, maintain, nurture, and accelerate? And then how do we know which ones are preventing us from growing, maintaining, and accelerating? So welcome back to God Mode.
Yes.
Thank you.
Even if you do live in a hole, welcome.
Yeah, I don't know about that whole guy. An example.
Internet access is everywhere now, so
True.
Yeah, I would say, identifying relationships, identifying anything that's not serving us is a good practice of awareness. The practice of not being aware is not a malicious intent. However, it does come at a cost. And things that we are not aware of will creep up. And those are the unconscious blinders that are sometimes we call secondary gains. And identifying a relationship that may not be serving you, listen, it served a purpose at one point, right? It was there for you at one point. It's time to identify if it's still serving you and if it's time to transcend to a new area or a new time of your life where it can be improved.
yeah, I was just thinking the same thing. It's perfect. I mean, it's serving you in an area that you may not be aware of sometimes, even if it's in a relationship that you find to be not serving you. So let's give them an example, yeah? So let's say someone believes that in order to be a good person in a relationship, a good partner, they have to sacrifice for the other person. So they will find a partner that expects that sacrifice. They'll find a partner that will unconsciously do things to cause them to naturally or intentionally somehow requires them to sacrifice certain things. And that becomes a self-fulfilling cycle in a sense. If you refer back to our last episode, this is actually a self-sabotaging pattern. So another pattern would be if someone doesn't believe they deserve wonderful love, this love that is pure, kind, full of compassion and patience, some sort of almost like a movie, picture perfect, type of love. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but if you don't believe you deserve that, what happens is you may actually, let's say you believe you deserve 80% of that, and then the other 20% is maybe what you observed growing up. Maybe your parents fought a lot, maybe it's something else, and that's part of your belief about relationships. And you may get in a relationship where that relationship is mostly good, mostly really good, but that 20% is toxic and painful. And it proves to you that this perfect relationship doesn't exist, and or it fulfills some sort of unconscious emotional need. See, I'll say this quickly. A lot of people feel the need to be needed or wanted. Not saying that's a bad thing or good thing. It's just that it's a need or want, right? So some people may get themselves into relationships that cause them to feel like they are needed or wanted, whether it's financially, emotionally, physically, even though everything else may not be serving them, but they feel needed and wanted, appreciated in those aspects. They're like, oh man, that's what I need or want now. So yeah.
So if they grew up in a chaotic environment, mom and dad, they're always yelling and they're used to that chaos. So without even realizing it, and I've actually seen this is anecdotal, and this is not mental or medical advice to any capacity or any degree. That's not our role. These are all just our observations. Just get that clear. But I've also seen, my mom's a therapist, and she'll talk about how people that grow up in certain environments tend to draw those similar environments back to them in the forms of new people. And I don't exactly know why that is, other than that's what they're used to. But some of those relationships clearly don't serve them. And it's not obvious it's like, yeah, if it's 100% a bad deal, I think most people can identify that. If there's like a 40% gain, there's something where it's like, yeah, like you said, even 80% of the time it's good. And then there's 20% of it that you're like, well, maybe I deserve that. Or like, maybe I'm okay with this. Or maybe I just need people in my life, and so I'll take kind of whatever I can get. How does someone get out of that headspace? Let's say this is their first time listening to us. And if so, make sure you subscribe. But let's say that they're here and they have a handful of relationships. One of them they know is just like rock solid. The rest they wish were better. A couple of them they're thinking, maybe I don't need those anymore. Not that I need it, but maybe I don't want those in my life anymore. What does a person do?
I think you'd be aware of energy that's attached to the relationship, that's attached to the meaning behind it too. As you were saying, if you talked about the example of like chaos in the beginning, right? They grew up in a chaotic environment, but there was still love for the mother and father or whoever the caretakers were in that environment. You might attach that chaos equals love unconsciously. There might be a decision there, right? I'll give an example. When I was playing football in high school, I attached reward, needs and wants, right? Validation to violence, right? Weird connection, but I did it unconsciously. I was violent in a sport, which got me praise around the school, which got me praise from the community and family. So I naturally seeked out those things in other forms. I went into boxing. Sometimes I would get into any street fights, or I would get into altercations and use violence in unecological ways. I'll just be blunt about that.
Michael's a great guy to travel downtown or really anywhere with, because you always feel safe. He's like a 3-time Golden Gloves, like semi-pro winner.
I now no longer pick fights, guys. I am very pleasant to hang out with.
I just win them.
It's also not true. Anyway, what I'm saying is there's an unconscious connection that I used to have about violence equaled validation, rewards. There was energy within that connection. And we've talked about this so much times. There's the language of the unconscious is emotion, which is energy, right? So begin to understand if there's an energy connection to a relationship that you have that's no longer serving you, it's about your energy. So if you're with someone, if you're with people and you're like, man, I don't feel as energized as I used to be with this person, is that relationship no longer serving you, and therefore you're not getting the energy that used to be from it. It doesn't just have to be a person, right? My example was my relationship to a sport, to an activity I was doing. So the relationships can obviously be to human beings, which there's a massive energy connection to, but also to the things that you invest in and that you love.
Yeah, relationships are interesting because relationships, think about the word relationship. What does that mean? How do you relate and connect, right? And so oftentimes the patterns that we've been speaking of about our past, humans are interesting in a sense that they're very, very, very good at recreating what they're familiar with. So what you were saying earlier and what you were saying earlier, right? Why are they finding new people with the same issues? People like what they're familiar with because that is safety. That is preservation of the species.
Hmm.
So when you're familiar with something, you tend to seek it out because you know the danger, you know the input, output, the reward, you know everything.
Oh, interesting.
Or everything in a sense, right? Everything that you're aware of. What people don't know is, and in fact, I'll say this real quick, how many people don't like public speaking, which we address actually in Sales God. Public speaking, some say they fear that more than death.
Yeah.
I mean, we've heard that.
It's like a crippling fear for some people.
Now, that's because they cannot fathom relating to that many people and getting hyper feedback in that short amount of time. But let me say something even further. It's that they're not familiar with what may happen, the unknown in a sense, right? So they prefer what's familiar. And so when people get into situations where they are unfamiliar, like public speaking, because they don't, well, especially those who fear, they don't know what the response of the audience is. They're unfamiliar with other people's patterns and whatever. So that is why they fear that more than something that seems to be very predictable, such as even death, right? And we're all safe and healthy here. What I'm saying is simple. If you are afraid of the unfamiliar, then you'll keep getting the same thing that you and or previous generations got.
And you'll keep staying with relationships that you haven't identified that aren't serving you yet, or haven't continued to serve you in positive ways because you're familiar with this. So, I mean, to example, think about the person who stayed in the romantic relationship longer than they should have been, even though they're like, my partner is not treating me fairly, ecologically, or I'm just not getting the reward that I want from them. Or someone who stays with an employer, even though they're like, I should have got that raise by now, right? I should have gotten this. I'm not getting all the benefits from it. It's familiar to them. They're staying with what's familiar to them rather than going to, as William was saying, the unknown.
So let's cut to the chase to help our audience. How do you identify what may not be a good relationship? Well, you're familiar with the downside of everything you are familiar with. You need to recognize that if you stay within what's familiar, you're going to get a familiar feeling. So anytime you get into a new relationship, whether it's work, or business or romantic or any other relationship, if you feel that feeling of familiarity, it can be a good thing, but you also need to observe what else you may be familiar with from the past.
So you're saying, are there relics that exist as kind of a lingering effect in a new relationship, a new friendship or something, but then there's that thing that like kind of still keeps happening, and it keeps happening with you say this, and it cracks me up. Everybody knows that one person that moves, and she goes, or he goes, whoever it could be, they move, then they start dating, they go, it's just weird. Everywhere I go, I just keep dating the same crazy people. I don't know what it is. That person goes to another town. I got to start over, start a new life. I keep finding these same difficult, charged, contentious, crazy people everywhere they go. It's like, well, what's the common denominator here?
Multiple divorces. Think about this. Multiple divorces. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with these people. What I am saying is they keep going to the people they're familiar with. Those patterns didn't change within them, therefore their projection didn't change. So same thing with work. They can switch jobs, but they keep finding annoying or micromanaging or simply just hard to work with colleagues. They can switch job again and they'll have another problem. So what human relationships are, listen to this, they're here to give us a mirror of the patterns that we're unaware of inside. So the human relationships are here to serve us, even when they are not seemingly a great relationship. They're here to reveal to us what we are unfamiliar with. So the how to figure this out, we're going to talk more about that in the next episode. I think that right now you're at least recognizing, if I stay with what I'm familiar with, then I may keep getting the same, I may keep getting the same thing, and on top of it, I may not experience the change that I desire. I'm going to give you a quick hint. The next episode, we're going to talk about design. If you want to, and this is something that most people don't consider, if you want to recognize what it is that is not a good relationship, you need to recognize what you want. Because all of us, I would say too many of us, know too well what we don't want. And that's where we're focusing on. And remember, if you listen to our last couple of episodes, what you focus on, you pour energy into, and your unconscious mind thinks of that as, oh, this is the visual instruction to what my next step is. What you play on the stage of your mind is a preview of coming attraction. So if you are continually only aware of what you don't want, you're giving visual as well as auditory as well as other kinesthetic signals to your mind saying, create this again because I'm familiar with it. Instead, you need to create something new that is different by design that you would want to be more familiar with. That is the beginning of the next episode. See you guys soon.